The real reason Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey and Ryan Leonard and Team USA is off to a slow start.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On. I'm also the host of the Washington Capitals podcast called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the real reason that Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey. We heard that it's because his hip resurfacing procedure did not go according to plan. Was that the real reason? We'll talk about that a little bit later. We will talk about how Team USA and Ryan Leonard, and then in the final segment, we will talk about the coaching carousel in the NHL. But just to get it going here, talking about Nick Backstrom, and we know what he means to this team. He was huge for this team for so many years, all the assists, how many goals that he assisted Alex Ovechkin on, those kind of things that suffices to say, you could say that Alex Ovechkin wouldn't be the player that he is today if it wasn't for guys like Nick Backstrom. But now there's been reports out there that what was the real reason that Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey. I had just assumed, I took it for face value, that Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey because of his hip problem. We know he had that hip resurfacing procedure done because it was just too much. He couldn't play with his kids. He couldn't even tie his shoes. So he went and did the procedure that needed to be done just so he could get on with his day-to-day life. He came back, but it didn't respond the way that he had hoped. He saw, limited role with the Capitals. His numbers were way down. I think that he saw Connor McMichael kind of chomping at the bit, wanting to get in there. And he did the noble thing by stepping away from hockey. But now there's been reports, and there was a report with Nick Backstrom talking about the real reason here. We do know that he stepped away. Recently, there were false reports circulating about his absence from the Capitals, which Backstrom slammed. Radio Sport and Hockey, a show on Sverige Radio, claimed that Backstrom was not really injured, but was instead not playing due to a schism with head coach Spencer Carberry. However, Backstrom has denied these claims and called them untrue. And I know where this emanates from, and where it comes from, I think, is there was an interview right around the time, it was shortly before Nick Backstrom stepped away from hockey, that you could tell that Spencer Carberry was not too pleased about the way that Backstrom was playing out on the ice. And in one interview, he kind of alluded to the fact that, changes are going to need to be made if he doesn't start getting more production. It was pretty vague, but you could tell that he wasn't happy with the play of Nick Backstrom out on the ice. And then subsequently later is when we found out that he stepped away from hockey indefinitely. I think that oftentimes people kind of draw these comparisons and they like to read into things a little bit more than maybe they should be. But I think that is ultimately where this emanates from. In November, Backstrom released a statement explaining his decision to take a leave from absence from the game. He said, "Given my ongoing injury situation, I decided to take some time and step away from the game. This is a difficult decision, but one I feel is right for my health at the time. Backstrom also thanked his teammates, the organization, and fans for unwavering support throughout the process. Again, I don't believe that that is true at all. I think that ultimately that is something to drum up listens for a podcast or a blog or some sort of publication, because everything that I've seen from Nick Backstrom during his career with the Capitals and the NHL is a real noble, likable, trustworthy, not the kind of guy that says anything bad about anyone. So I don't think that that is the case, but I am just trying to recollect where that comes from. And for me, that is, I think, ultimately where someone was reading into something that didn't necessarily need to be read into. Backstrom's contract with the Capitals expires after one more year, and he has a cap hit of $9.2 million. GM Brian McClellan has stated that the plan is for Backstrom to remain on long-term injured reserve for that final year. And I honestly, I don't see him coming back and playing hockey again. I would love to be wrong about that. I would love to see him in camp and just totally kill it. But I just don't think that's the case. There has not been a lot of information out about how he is proceeding, but just based on what Brian McClellan said, it sounds to me like it's not too favorable. There is quite a bit of time between now and training camp, but my hunch is that he probably played his last games of hockey last season. Backstrom has not made any decisions regarding his future in the game, nor has he officially announced his retirement. He has not spoken to local media since taking his leave. Backstrom leaves behind a monumental legacy in DC, where he put up 271 goals and 762 assists for 1,033 points in 1,105 games. So regardless, if he did play his last game ever, I will forever remember what kind of great hockey player he was. And it's unfortunate that things kind of have to get dragged through the mud here a little bit, that there was this rift between Backstrom and Spencer Carberry. But, you know, I do remember that interview where it was mentioned that he was just not really happy about his production. And, you know, the thing about Spencer Carberry is he likes to win above and beyond everything else. And I think that he was irritated that the team wasn't performing. And I think that in part that irritation came from the fact that Nick Backstrom was not performing the way that he had hoped. And I think to a certain extent, when Spencer Carberry took this job, he took the job with the, you know, the team, the roster sketched out in front of him, where I have Kuzi, I have Backstrom, I have this player, I have that player. Well, what is one of the things that we learned is this last season, someone took that snow globe and shook it all up. And this team was markedly different at the end of the season than how it was initially sketched out to start the season. And I think that Backstrom not being the Backstrom of old was frustrating because I think that there was some, not promises, but I think that he thought that Backstrom was going to be okay. Because if we remember last summer, he was actually playing competitive hockey in Sweden, and it looked good. Brian McClellan said that he looked good, and was an about face for Brian McClellan, said that he thought that he was in a good spot, and we'll see where it goes. But as it turns out, it wasn't okay. And a sad story for Nick Backstrom. Ultimately, I guess it would have been better if he would have hung up the skates maybe a couple, 2-3 years ago, and maybe he wouldn't be in the position that he's in right now. But, you know, I have a feeling that this has been something that has been lingering on for much longer. In fact, I know it has. I think that it has just come to a fever pitch, you know, this last season where he couldn't quite deal with it. I think that probably, you know, hindsight, looking in the rearview mirror, he should have probably stepped away when he first noticed the problems. I mean, it's not like Nick Backstrom is hurting money. I just think, you know, kind of a lot like TJ Oshie, he just loves hockey that much. But I think the question isn't too much in doubt. I think that he will spend next season on the long-term injured reserve, and that will be the history of Nick Backstrom playing hockey in the district. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will talk about how Ryan Leonard and Team USA got off to a slow start, but it was a good game for Martin Fehervary. I'll discuss straight ahead. It's winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and make every playoff shot count. Now, listen, oftentimes you're watching an NBA playoff game. Maybe you're saying you're watching a Nationals game, and for some reason you're not that into it. Open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, the game is that much more exciting. So head to FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV Channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So it seems like Ryan Leonard is a charmed man. Everything that he attempts to do, he does really, really well. We saw what kind of production he got with Boston College. We saw what he did at the World Juniors. Just win after win after win, a windfall, a charmed life for Ryan Leonard. But it was a bit of an about face for Ryan Leonard and Team USA as they fell in a tough game that many had hoped that they were going to win, and it was against Team Slovakia and Martin Fehervary in a thrilling showdown at the IIHF World Championship in Prague. The United States team faced off against Slovakia on Monday, and two players from Washington found themselves on opposite sides of the ice. Ryan Leonard and Martin Fehervary went head-to-head, with Fehervary's team ultimately coming out on top in a 5-4 overtime win. And, it's one of the things that I was hoping for that much. I'm just saying that I wish that Team USA would have found a way to win today. Of course, it's great for Martin Fehervary and Team Slovakia, but I was hoping for a big dub for Team USA. Fehervary was a key player for Slovakia, ranking second among his team members in ice time with 21:38 and picking up an assist to help secure the victory. His strong performance was part of an impressive run for Slovakia, who currently rank second in Group B with 5 points and a 2-1-0 record. It's a good thing for Martin Fehervary and Team Slovakia. We know what kind of player that Martin Fehervary is, and it's about representing your country. We know that the players on the Capitals that chose not to, Charlie Lindgren, for example, chose not to do it. So the players that chose to represent their respective countries, we wish them nothing but the best. I hope it's Team USA, but if it's not, Slovakia would be a good second for me. But for Leonard, again, the guy that has lived a charmed life in hockey, it was a difficult game. He dressed as the extra forward for Team USA and only saw 4 minutes, 48 seconds of ice time. Despite his limited playing time, he managed to post an assist, but his plus-minus rating was -1 for the game. And again, he is playing in a league, primarily of men. And maybe we're starting to kind of see come into focus that we saw how well that Leonard has played in Boston College. We saw how great he played at juniors. Maybe, there's that difference between college and the NHL that, I think as Capitals fans, we kind of hope that it's just going to be plug and play, that he's going to put the skates on, he's going to put the jersey on, and he's just going to be a top tier NHL talent. Maybe this is kind of, proving in a lot of ways that maybe we should pump the brakes and take our time. Again, this is me just getting way ahead of myself. In the next game, he might totally kill it, but all things considered, it's something to consider. Overall, it's been a challenging start to the tournament for Leonard and Team USA, who have gone 1-1-1 through 3 games with 4 points so far. Leonard has dressed as the extra forward for all 3 games and has 1 assist to his name. On the other end, Fehervary has been enjoying a successful tournament for Slovakia with a goal and assist in 2 penalty minutes and a plus-minus rating of +1 through 3 games. He's also one of the ice time leaders for his nation, trailing behind only Simon Nemec. So again, I would like to think that there's a way for them to turn it around. It's been a bit of a slow start for Ryan Leonard, but again, I'm just kind of isolating in a vacuum. He could have played better, but he didn't also get a lot of ice time, so those are all things to consider. Despite the slow start, there's still plenty of time for Team USA to turn things around, and Leonard will be hoping for more ice time and a chance to play on a different line as the team looks to find its winning formula. Meanwhile, Fehervary will be aiming to continue his impressive form and provide valuable offense for the blue line for Slovakia. Again, so was a rough game for Ryan Leonard and Team USA, but there are still some games left to be played here, so hopefully they can find a way to turn it around and right this ship so we can get it headed in the right direction. Ultimately, what these games are about, like I spoke of, is just representing your country, maybe working on your game so it can stay a little bit more fresh in the off season. And, I think the perception is oftentimes that these guys just go back to their respective countries and they're just kind of couch potatoes for the whole summer. I don't think that is really the case, though. These guys have pretty strict regimens of workout and diet so they can stay in peak condition. And I think in particular for Fehervary and Leonard, it will serve them well as there's not going to be, that big hill to climb as far as working out and getting ready for next season. All right, so coming up here straight ahead, we will be talking about the coaching carousel in the NHL. We saw some teams move their coaches, some coaches retired. Most notably, what are the Toronto Maple Leafs going to do in the future? It seems like one giant recycle bin. Let's talk about that straight ahead. Policy Genius is the country's leading insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. So one of the things that you can do to be prepared if you're a married guy or gal is to get life insurance so you can be there for your family in the event that you are not there, so you can be there for your significant other and your kids. Policy Genius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help walk you through it. Talk to a team of award-winning agents who will walk you through the process step by step. Easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Capitals are in a good position as they have head coach Spencer Carberry at the helm. I don't think there's going to be any changes between now and the start of next season, but for some teams that underperformed, there is going to be changes. Most notably, I would say the Toronto Maple Leafs. I've said on this show, I don't think that there is a market out there, a city out there that loves their home team more than the Toronto Maple Leafs. If they're a good team, they love them. If they're a bad team, they love them. But I know one thing, the recycle bin keeps churning out different head coaches. And sometimes they're just the recycle bin from one team to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's interesting to see where they will land and who will be the next coaches. Over the past 2 years, there has been a lot of movement in the NHL head coaching position. 28 out of 32 clubs have made changes, with 7 transitions happening mid-season in 23-24 and 4 more vacancies opening up at the end of the season. Currently, there are 6 head coaches openings in the NHL, including 2 clubs that made the 2024 NHL playoffs. And it's interesting, sometimes even making it to the playoffs is not enough. I think Toronto in particular, you're one of the teams that I'm looking at there. Also the Winnipeg Jets, which is a bit of a different case as their head coach retired, making it to the playoffs in the first round is not enough. Sometimes making it to the second round is not enough. I think, especially for a team like the Maple Leafs, they want to make a big push for the cup. Recently, some head coaches have been fired or left their positions. The Seattle Kraken parted ways with franchise's first ever head coach, Dave Hakstol. After the season, it was reported that some of the important players on the team wanted Hakstol out, and GM Ron Francis elected to listen to the team. Again, you want to take a look at the Seattle Kraken. I think that many people drew comparisons between the Seattle Kraken and the Vegas Golden Knights, that maybe they can emulate that. Maybe they can win a Stanley Cup in somewhat short order. It has been kind of a bumpy ride for Seattle. They have made it to the playoffs, but ultimately they want more, and it seems like there's a bit of a rift between the head coach and the players. Another team in particular, the New Jersey Devils, also fired their head coach, Lindy Ruff, 3 months too late. As New Jersey waited until March to pull the plug, the team failed to reach the postseason despite finishing second in the Metro the previous year. Travis Green was named interim coach to the end of the season, but he left New Jersey for the head coaching job in Ottawa. So it keeps churning. It keeps churning. And, one of the things that Bruce Boudreau says, it's a job that you get hired knowing that you're going to get fired. Don't, have any grand plans of being on one team for too long. Unless, you can pull a rabbit out of your hand, you'll probably be on the move many times if you're lucky. Todd McClellan, one of the coaches that's rumored to be being pursued for the head coaching job in Toronto. The coach of the Los Angeles Kings lost his job in his 5th year at the helm after a miserable stretch from late December to early February. GM Rob Blake parted ways with the head coach in an effort to save the season and his job as well. Jim Hiller was named interim head coach and considered one of the candidates for the full-time job. Let's talk about the Ottawa Senators, another team that every year some people say this is going to be the year for Ottawa. This is going to be the year. It hasn't been the year, and I think that it will be in time because they have a lot of prospects. They have, sprinkled with some veterans. I think that in time, the Ottawa Senators will be a team to be reckoned with. But the Senators fired DJ Smith in mid-December after years of failing to take the necessary steps forward with the club. Although the roster was flawed, Smith did some of the young players' progress. Martin took over as interim, but he was always viewed as a short-term replacement before the offseason. Another head coach that is being highly sought after is Craig Berube from the Blues. The Blues parted ways with Craig in mid-December after a mediocre start to the season. This was likely the most controversial firing of the season, as Berube was the biggest reason why St. Louis won the Stanley Cup in 2019. Who are they going to get to fill that role? If you are a fan of the NHL, in a larger picture other than the Capitals, who is going to go into St. Louis and do a better job than him? It's going to be tough. Turning the things around is a difficult thing. Turning the team from one of the worst clubs to a contender in a matter of months. Drew Bannister took over the interim and signed an extension this offseason to remain in the role moving forward. So that's what's going to happen. Do you think that he is going to be able to do that? Or do you think that he is going to be, making a quick exit? What we know about St. Louis, just based on the fact that they were willing to cut ties with Craig Berube, is that there is not a lot of room for tolerance for failure. So if they don't get the kind of success that they're looking for, it's going to be off to the next one. Well, some head coaches have left their positions. Others are on the fast track to becoming an NHL head coach. Ryan Warofsky, the Sharks assistant coach, is one of such coaches like that. Although just 36, he was a finalist for the Sharks head coaching job in 2022 offseason. Although the team chose David Quinn instead, Quinn brought him into his staff as an assistant. Warofsky became the youngest head coach since Laviolette in 1999 to win an AHL championship in 21-22, leading the Chicago Wolves to a 2022 Calder Cup victory. Not many coaches at his age land a head coaching gig, but Warofsky could help soon get that title. So it's an interesting time. And I also heard that Bruce Boudreau, yes, Gabby from the Capitals, might be one of the guys that they'll be seeking out in Toronto. I love Gabby, and I wish that if he wants to be a head coach again, that he finds a job that he's looking for. But what are some of the knocks about Gabby? He can do good things during the regular season, but kind of doesn't know how to coach in the postseason, or has a hard time taking his teams into the postseason. And I think that ultimately that's what they're looking for. And, you know, when you take a look at Gabby here for a moment, I think he has a great hockey mind. I listen to him on the NHL Network, on NHL TV, on Monumental, all of them. He's very smart, but for whatever reason, he just has a hard time taking the teams that he is coaching to the next level. And I think that he's been on enough teams. He's head coached enough teams that people kind of know the book on him. And I don't know if they would offer him another job, and if he would want it, because we know he has bounced around quite a few different places. Anaheim, we take a look at how he did from there. We see how he played with Minnesota, or coached for Minnesota and Vancouver. He has jumped all over the place, not to mention being the head coach of the Hershey Bears. There's some other coaching stops in the mix there, as he's been bouncing around quite a different few places. But in any event, if Gabby wanted to be a head coach, more power to him. But I think that the book is out there on a lot of these guys that are in the recycle bin. One of the things that I have noticed is they get a couple opportunities, and then all of a sudden they are assistant coaches, those kind of things, or they're being coaches in the AHL or college, that kind of thing. So I think, you know, when you take a look at someone like Peter Laviolette, a guy that has maintained a job in the NHL just based on his track record, there's a lot that can be said for that. John Tortorella, another guy, despite the fact that he is quite polarizing, he still maintains a job in the NHL. And I have no doubt in my mind, if a head coach like Torts got fired, there would be another team all in on him. So, you know, the guys that are really good keep their jobs. The guys that don't do so well, sooner or later, you know, people don't want to take a chance on them again. So that's kind of my thought on Gabby. There's quite a book on Bruce Boudreau and what kind of coach he is. And I think the big knock on him is he doesn't have in his skill set to take his teams over the top and win a Stanley Cup. All right, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. When you're done here, head on over to Locked On's 24/7 streaming channel, available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team. It is every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.